In the next section, we'll again make a little pivot to a very different problem. We're going back to NP-hard problems for sure, and try to see how far we can get with randomization, even if we shouldn't expect to get down to something polynomial time. Maybe we can do something that's not so easy to do without randomization, and I think it's true in this case. Also, the strategy is much more versatile than this specific problem, and the analysis technique also is much more versatile. And so I think for that purpose, rather than specifically the result about satisfiability, this is worth having a look at. We'll again use random sampling in a specific way. What we've so far seen is if I'm trying to solve some problem and the solution is tricky to construct in a targeted fashion, say perfect hashing, perfect hash function, then I might try random sampling if I know that there's many possible solutions. It's just a little tricky to get one specifically chosen. Then we can just try this. What we'll now use is random sampling when the object itself is rather rare or rather hard to find, and we still want to somehow do something non-trivial to improve upon the brute force search that just tries all possible alternatives. And surprisingly, this is possible. What we'll need a bit to set up the methodology is a tiny detour where the problem we're solving is not actually a hard problem. And that's the 2-SAT problem. You remember 3-SAT as the NP-hard problem. Let's look at 2-SAT. Sounds suspiciously similar. We're given a CNF formula where now we have at most 2 literals per clause, not 3. Why would that make such a big difference? Well, it does. This is a problem in P. And the reason is that if you have 2 literals, you can rewrite the clause as implications. It's just the good old A implies B is the same as not A or B, and then you apply this with the right negations. So any such clause with 2 literals can really be seen as 2 implications. Also, just from the logic, from the semantics itself, if L1 was not true, then to make the whole thing true, L2 has to be true. That means L1, not L1, implies L2. And also vice versa. What this means algorithmically is that we can represent the whole formula as a graph, where the vertices are the literals, which means the variables and their negations. That's all the vertices in the graph. And we have edges whenever there's an implication coming from some clause that means one thing implies another. And now we can try to satisfy the formula in the graph by picking certain vertices where we make that literal true. And we could try to just randomly pick a vertex, make that true, and then follow the outgoing edges, which give us implications. I also have to pick those vertices and set them to true. And that has more implications. I'm kind of going through the graph. Now, if I just do this planlessly, I might end up in a cycle. And then I could end up in a problem. The cycle might mean that some xi wants to be set to true, but then there's a cycle back to not xi, which also wants to be set to true, and then I'm not so sure what I should do. But if you think about this problem for a bit more, you can show that if such a situation happens, that there's a cycle from xi to not xi, that's actually always an indication that the formula is just not satisfiable. So if you ever run into this problem, there is a real fundamental problem that you're not going to get around ever. And if you don't run into this problem, you'll just find a satisfying assignment. You can make, instead of just starting at some random point and see where it leads you, a more efficient way is to use strong connected components. These can be computed in linear time with algorithms that you may have seen in undergrad. There's essentially a depth-first search behind it in a clever combination of depth-first search. So you could find the strong connected components, check if in any component you have both a variable and its negation. In that case, you have a contradiction, and you can just say there's no satisfying assignment. If that's not the case, then again, you know from strong components, if you contract every component into a single vertex, the resulting graph has to be a DAG. And so you can go through that DAG in topological sort order and satisfy all, and find a satisfying assignment by just starting at sources, satisfying them, and then following the implications. I've just run through this algorithm very quickly. If you've never seen this, maybe it's almost impossible to understand. My point was really just to say, this algorithm is in P. We already know a simple solution. It's actually a linear time solvable problem. So what comes now is not so useful by itself. It's about illustrating the technique. What can we do to find a satisfying assignment if we don't want to invoke any kind, we don't want to do any thinking, okay? No implication graphs, no strong components that make my head ache anyways. So let's do something random. First of all, we choose a uniformly chosen random assignment, which most of the time is not going to satisfy the formula. But let's try either way. If it currently does, then we're happy and we return it for sure. Otherwise, there must be some clause that's not satisfied. So there's two literals, and they're both false at the moment. So I'm going to pick arbitrarily one of them and make it true by flipping the assignment for that variable. And that's going to be my new assignment. Maybe I'm lucky and that satisfies the formula. Probably I'm not, and I just keep trying. It's a completely mindless way of solving this problem. And in a way, this shouldn't be allowed to be successful. But again, the two-sat problem is tame enough that it actually does succeed in a way. First of all, what does succeed mean? If I ever find a satisfying assignment, then I'm clearly proving that the formula is satisfiable. If I do this for a certain number of repetitions, we'll come back to this confidence parameter, then all I can say is that probably the formula is not satisfiable, right? It's a Monte Carlo algorithm. Now, the running time is not hard to analyze because these are just explicit loops, so you're going to run through things a couple of times. The number of loops, say the confidence we put to some constant for now, the number of loops is essentially quadratic in the number of variables, and all we do inside is pretty cheap. So it's not as great as the well thought out linear time algorithm, but at least not super far away. And indeed we can prove if we're given any two-sat formula and it's unsatisfiable, then we'll always output not satisfiable. But if it is satisfiable, then with high probability in terms of this confidence, we'll find a satisfying assignment. Okay? And yeah, the overall running time, I didn't even put on the slide. Is there anything interesting happening here? So this will take linear time in the formula if you do it naively. So I guess it'll be k squared times the confidence parameter, and then times the length of the formula, say n for that. But the interesting part is to analyze this, okay? The first statement we're not going to prove, that's obvious. If there's no satisfying assignment, I can try searching as long as I want. So clearly I won't find one. The interesting part is to show that I have a good chance of finding a satisfying assignment if there is one. So if the formula is satisfiable, that means there is at least some alpha that satisfies the formula. And I'm going to stick with this worst case that there's a single assignment making the formula true. In general, it could be many, but we'll just fix this one. And everything will be analyzed in terms of this worst case assumption that that's the only one. Okay. Then the algorithm is obviously running in iterations, so it'll compute different assignments in the different time steps. So let's say alpha t is the variable assignment in the tth iteration. And t clearly runs from 1 up to this confidence times, was it 2k squared? Yeah. Okay. And so the interesting parameter will be how far are we in these assignments that we try away from the satisfying one. And specifically what we'll look at is just the Hamming distance of our satisfying assignment, the single one that we pick, and what we currently have. That's a random process, and you can go up and down, you can go whatever, right? Hamming distance just means positions where they differ. So the number of variables where they differ. And so let's make a few obvious observations. If we ever have, okay, is to stay consistent, let's flip this around so we use k minus the distance. Then it's a positive thing to improve. So xt is our current, the number of variables that we correctly guessed. If we reach k, then we're happy. We found our satisfying assignment, and so then we can stop. Otherwise, we're going to keep trying. So what the algorithm does in this case is it finds a clause that's not satisfied and picks one of the literals and flips the assignment. So I'm going to change the variable assignment of a single variable. That's going to get my xt plus 1 either one better or one worse. I don't know which one. Of course, at the boundaries, if I'm somehow unlucky and I made every variable 0, then the -1 is not possible. But it's always going to be true that one of those two options is what happens. Now, what are the probabilities for these two outcomes? Sorry, xt plus 1. Let's focus on the good things in life. So what's the probability that I'm going to end up with the next, with an improvement? If you look at what we're doing, we have an unsatisfied clause. Currently, these are both in the wrong assignment. So there's different possibilities what alpha can assign to these variables. We could have one of them guessed right, or we could have both, we could have none of them guessed right, right? So in this unsatisfied clause C, could have 2 incorrect or 1 incorrect. If we guessed only 1 variable incorrect, then the probability 1/2 will improve. With probability 1/2, we improve. Come on. And if both were incorrect, then we always improve. Amazing. So with probability 1, we improve. So we don't know which of the two happens. All we can say is with probability at least 1/2, we're gonna see an improvement. And that's why 2SAT is easier. If you think, we'll apply the same trick to 3SAT later. There you have 3 literals. That's 3. 3 literals, and you don't know. In the worst case, you could have just one of them guessed right, guessed wrong, and you have to somehow hit 1 out of 3. That's going to be less likely. So it's less than 1/2 probability potentially to make an improvement. Whereas here we have at least 1/2. And so at any point in time in 2SAT, it's more likely to improve your assignment than to make it worse. And that's, I guess intuitively is making it much more likely to see improvement after improvement. Okay, we'll come back to that if that didn't help you too much. Also, the starting point x0 is any number between 0 and nk. We don't know where we start. In the worst case, we start at 0. Yeah, it won't ever get worse than that. And so we'll analyze this worst case in the following. Okay, how are we going to do that is, first of all, we note these transition probabilities, what happens to our assignment, and particularly this random variable of how many variables we have already assigned correctly. This is a Markov process, because all that comes next depends only on how many I've guessed correctly so far. In the way I've described it here, that's true. You can say it's a Markov process for the entire assignment. But for the behavior of how many we guessed correctly, it only depends really on the previous xt. Or at least we can say the true process is never going to behave worse than a Markov chain that only looks at the number.